The moment I heard the front door slam behind me, suitcase wheels clicking against the concrete of our driveway, I felt something I had not felt in 11 years of marriage. Freedom. Not the bittersweet kind, not the kind laced with regret. Pure, uncut, almost terrifying freedom, like stepping off a cliff and realizing you have had wings this whole time. Before I show you the blueprints of how my 11-year marriage collapsed in a single afternoon, drop a comment. Have you ever felt like a stranger in a house you paid for? My phone buzzed 47 minutes later. I was sitting on the edge of the bed in room 312 at the Hilton, staring at a static-filled television screen, watching the snow dance across the glass. Tyler's name flashed across the screen. I let it vibrate, let it crawl across the nightstand until it timed out. He called again and again. On the fourth attempt, I slowly slid the icon to answer. His voice hit the line like a shattered windshield. Panic! It was that high-pitched, vibrating frequency he uses when the real world refuses to bend to his mother's will. Victoria, what is going on? Mom is at the caterer's office right now. She tried to put down the $7,500 deposit for the Diamond Jubilee, and every single card declined. She tried the joint credit line, the debit card, everything. Even the backup card is bouncing. Did you block them? You need to call the bank right now and fix this. The manager says we lose the date if the funds aren't cleared by 5 p.m. I took a slow, deep breath. I looked at my reflection in the mirror over the hotel desk. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry anymore. I felt like a forensic accountant looking at a final report. Calm, clinical. I didn't block anything, Tyler, I said. My voice was steady, a sharp contrast to his frantic breathing. I audited our marriage. 6 months ago, I sat with a financial advisor and I realized I was the primary investor in a business that was going bankrupt. So, this morning, I moved the capital. The silence on the other end lasted exactly 5 seconds. I could hear the background noise of a busy office where Jennifer was likely making a scene. You what? Tyler whispered. The air had completely left his lungs. I moved $695,000, I continued. Because these funds were inherited or earned before our marriage and never, I repeat, never commingled with our joint expenses, they remain my protected separate property. Every cent of my personal inheritance, the bonuses from my architectural firm, and the proceeds from my previous property sale. It is sitting in a high-yield solo account with only my name on it, at a bank you don't even know exists. Victoria, that's our life savings. You can't just take it. We have 85 guests arriving tomorrow. Mom's family is flying in, my cousins from London. We have a month-long heritage project planned. You're being insane. No, Tyler. Insane is expecting me to fund my own replacement. Insane is telling me 85 people are moving into my house for a month without even asking me. Did you really think I was going to smile and set out the good towels for a hostile takeover? I'm not your event coordinator, and I'm definitely not your mother's bank. But she's 75! Tyler! This is her Diamond Jubilee! And it's my home. Or it was. Right now, it's a crime scene of a marriage I'm done investigating. Tell Jennifer to use her own retirement fund. Oh wait, I forgot. She doesn't have one because she spent the last decade expecting me to be her safety net. That safety net just folded up and left the building. I didn't wait for his reply. I didn't need to hear him defend her anymore. I ended the call and set the phone face down on the nightstand. For 11 years, my compassion had been a luxury they'd overdrafted. Today, I was just closing the account. To understand why I finally stepped off that cliff, you have to look at the blueprints of the cage I spent 11 years building for myself. As an architect, I am trained to spot structural flaws before they become catastrophes. Yet, in my own marriage, I ignored the cracks in the foundation until the entire roof was ready to collapse. I was earning $225,000 a year as a senior architect. Tyler was in pharmaceutical sales, but his territory and his drive had been shrinking for years. He had lost all his high-commission hospital accounts due to sheer complacency, eventually coasting on a base salary that barely covered our property taxes. When we bought our Lake Forest manor, I provided the entire $250,000 down payment from my career bonuses and the sale of my previous property. I thought I was building a sanctuary for our future. In reality, I was just financing my own displacement. Jennifer, my mother-in-law, was the self-appointed inspector of my life. She visited often, and every time she walked through my front door, she had a way of making my professional success feel like a moral failure. She called my clean, modern design cold and unwelcoming. She would run her hand along the granite countertops I had worked 60-hour weeks to afford and sigh about how they lacked the family warmth of her old kitchen in Ohio. People often ask how a logical, high-achieving woman could let herself be treated like a line item in someone else's budget. It is what psychologists call learned helplessness. It is a slow-acting poison that works by eroding your boundaries until you can't remember where they used to be. I spent years being sensible, trying to add more rooms to the marriage to accommodate their demands, not realizing I was building a house with no doors. I convinced myself that if I just earned more or smiled through the subtle insults, the marriage would eventually stabilize. I became an architect of my own imprisonment, welding the doors shut, one compromise at a time. Every time Tyler told me, instead of asked me about a decision, I told myself he was just being a leader. Every time Jennifer rearranged my pantry because I didn't know how to cook for a real family, I convinced myself she was just being helpful. I was the silent investor in their version of a family, footing the bill for a narrative where I was always the outsider. My compassion was a financial resource they had mined until there was nothing left but a hollow shell. But architects know one thing above all else. If the foundation is rotten, you don't renovate. You demolish. I remember the day we signed the papers for the manor. I handed over that check for $250,000, and Tyler just squeezed my hand and whispered that his mom would be so proud of him, not for us, but for him. Even then, Jennifer was the ghost in the room. She had moved into my head long before she tried to move 85 people into my house. My former studio, the only place where I felt like myself, was about to be turned into a dormitory for people who didn't even like me. That was the moment I realized the invisible chain wasn't made of steel, it was made of my own silence. Tyler came home one evening in late September with a look on his face that I knew meant my boundaries were about to be tested. It was excitement, but it was the wrong kind, the kind that has no room for anyone else's opinion. He sat at the kitchen table, the one I had worked 60-hour weeks to afford, and declared that his mother, Jennifer, was turning 75. He did not ask how we should celebrate. He told me he was throwing her a diamond jubilee right here in our house. 85 guests, Victoria, he said, his eyes bright with a decision already made. Family from Ohio, her church group, even cousins flying in from overseas. It is going to be incredible. I sat there, my mind immediately going to the logistics of our 4-bedroom manor. 85 people, Tyler. In our home? And here is the best part, he continued, leaning forward as if he were delivering a gift instead of a sentence. Since they are all traveling, I told them they could stay with us. We have the space, the basement, the living room. It will be a month-long heritage archive project. A month? I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. 30 days of strangers living in a house I pay for? Instead of hearing my concern, Tyler's jaw set into that stubborn line I had come to recognize as the drawbridge going up. He told me Jennifer had been calling people for 2 weeks already. He had presented me with a done deal, a psychological siege designed to force me to play the role of the supportive wife. The invasion began before the first guest even arrived. I came home a few days later to find my former studio, the place I called the Heritage Suite, completely stripped. Tyler had spent the afternoon moving my reading chair, my architectural sketches, and my professional library into the basement. He replaced them with 12 high-end air mattresses he had ordered on my Amazon account. When I confronted him, he just shrugged and said we needed the space for heritage. I stood in that empty room, looking at the walls I had designed to be my sanctuary, and realized that my marriage had become a subscription I was forced to fund. I was not his partner. I was an event coordinator being managed like a difficult employee. Tyler was treating my hard-earned resources as his personal inheritance, and Jennifer was the director of the heist. Hotels are too expensive, Victoria, he snapped when I tried the rational approach. Mom's friends are retirees. Why do you always make everything about control? I realized then that in Tyler's mind, my boundaries were a problem to be solved rather than a right to be respected. He was not asking for a celebration. He was demanding an occupation. My compassion had been a luxury they had overdrafted for years. And as I looked at those air mattresses lined up like soldiers in my hallway, I knew the account was finally empty. I stopped making excuses for his enmeshment. It was time to start making plans of my own. The air mattresses were the physical shrapnel of my marriage, but the real explosion was digital. I did not cry as I looked at the empty space where my studio used to be. I did not ask Tyler why he felt entitled to strip my professional life for his mother's vanity. Architects do not get emotional about a failing beam. They measure the structural deficit and determine if the building is worth saving. I sat in the darkness of my home office that night, the blue light of my laptop screen illuminating a reality I had been too sensible to see. Through our shared cloud account, I accessed a folder Tyler thought was hidden. Inside, I found the Mitchell Heritage Legacy group chat. There were 847 messages spanning the last 6 months. I scrolled through them with a steady hand, my breathing as even as a metronome. Most of it was mundane party planning, but a thread from mid-October, right after our first argument about the Jubilee, turned my blood to ice water. Jennifer had started the thread at 9:47 p.m. She wrote, "We need to talk about the house situation. Tyler says Victoria put down most of the money, but both names are on the deed. If they split, she could force a sale. We need to make sure that doesn't happen." My husband's response was a single thumbs up emoji. One digital gesture of consent to his mother's plan to steal my $250,000 down payment. I scrolled further and found the blueprint for the heist. Jennifer had consulted a lawyer friend from her church. She wrote, "If I establish residency of family members in the house, long-term guests staying for extended periods, it complicates any forced sale. Something about occupancy rights. It is worth looking into." The 85 guests were not there for a birthday. They were a legal tactical force designed to squat in my manor until I was pressured into a settlement that left me with nothing. Then I found the kill shot. I clicked on a scanned PDF attachment labeled registration. It was a state voter registration form for Jennifer. She had changed her legal mailing address to my house 6 months ago. At the bottom was a digital signature that looked like a jagged, rushed version of mine. Tyler had helped her forge my consent to establish her residency in my own home. I rubbed my eyes, trying to summon a sense of betrayal, but there was only clarity. This was not a family disagreement. It was a criminal enterprise. My marriage had not been a partnership. It had been a long-term fraud where I was the primary mark. Anger was not loud this time. It was clinical. I spent the next 4 hours creating a secure cloud backup of every single message and every forged document. I didn't answer Tyler when he called out from the bedroom to ask why I was still up. I went back to my spreadsheet. This was no longer about a party. This was accounting. I called Brooke the next morning. We had been friends since our freshman year of college, back when we were both pulling all-nighters in the library. Now, she was a high-stakes family law attorney who built her reputation on dismantling predatory spouses. I walked into her office in downtown Chicago, a manila folder tucked under my arm like a set of sensitive blueprints. It was the design for a demolition. I need a structural assessment of my marriage, Brooke, I said, sliding the folder across her mahogany desk. I didn't offer a greeting or a smile. I didn't have any of those resources left in my reserve. I showed her the 847 messages I had recovered from the cloud. I showed her the forged voter registration with the jagged imitation of my signature. I told her about the 12 air mattresses currently occupying the room where I used to design sustainable futures. Brooke didn't gasp. She didn't offer me a tissue or a sympathetic pat on the hand. She just put on her reading glasses and started scanning the documents. "This isn't a standard domestic dispute, Victoria," she said, her voice taking on a sharp, professional edge. "This is a coordinated effort to commit residential fraud and financial misconduct." They weren't just throwing a party. They were trying to initiate a hostile takeover of a primary asset. We spent 3 hours drafting the counterstrike. We didn't just file a standard divorce petition. We weaponized the 47 journal entries I had been keeping since October. Every rearranged cabinet, every uninvited prayer circle, every microaggression from Jennifer was documented with a date, a time, and a direct quote. I even included the 3 urgent cease and desist notices from the Lake Forest Homeowners Association regarding the illegal street parking and noise violations caused by Jennifer's uninvited crowd. We filed an emergency motion for exclusive occupancy of the Lake Forest Manor. We used the Mitchells' own group chat strategy as the primary evidence to prove they were attempting to manipulate occupancy rights to block a future sale of the property. I signed the documents with the same precision I used to sign off on a $1 million construction project. This was the most important architecture of my life, the architecture of my own boundaries. We also filed a temporary restraining order to prevent Tyler from making any financial decisions over $500 without my written consent. My $695,000 was already secured in my solo account, but I wanted to ensure that every remaining cent in our joint checking was locked down. As I walked out of Brooke's office, the city air felt crisp and clarifying. My life was no longer a messy emotional equation I couldn't solve. It was a legal case with a high probability of success. I was the architect of my own retribution, and the blueprints were flawless. I went back to the Hilton to prepare for the final walkthrough. Jennifer wanted a diamond jubilee that would go down in family history. I was going to make sure she got exactly what she deserved, a very public audit of her own cruelty. I returned to the manor 72 hours later with Brooke by my side. I didn't use my key. I didn't want to fumble with the lock like a stranger. I rang the bell to my own house and waited. When Tyler opened the door, the smell of burnt coffee and too many bodies hit me like a physical wall. The air conditioning was struggling, choking against the collective heat of 85 bodies. I could hear the plumbing groaning, literally groaning. It was under the impossible demand of our 4 overworked bathrooms. My living room, the one I had designed with open spaces and natural light, was a chaotic camp of air mattresses and open suitcases. They had raided my industrial-sized pantry, burning through 3 months of gourmet supplies in just 3 days after the caterer rightfully refused to deliver without a deposit. Jennifer was at the center of it all, perched in my favorite leather armchair by the lakeside window. She looked up as I entered, her expression shifting from matriarchal smugness to sharp defense in a heartbeat. "Victoria," she said, her voice projecting for the benefit of the relatives watching. "Finally, you've come to your senses. Tyler tells me the bank had some sort of glitch with the Jubilee funds. You need to handle it immediately. My guests are hungry." I didn't answer her. I didn't even look at her. I turned to Brooke, who reached into her briefcase and pulled out the first set of documents. I walked to the center of the room, standing on the rug I had paid $5,000 for, and looked around at the Mitchell family. "I have something to share with everyone," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had the frequency of a coming storm. On October 14th, at 9:47 p.m., Jennifer Mitchell sent a message to a group chat many of you are in. She said, "We need to talk about the house. If Victoria and Tyler split, she could force a sale. I've talked to a lawyer. If we establish residency for 85 guests, it complicates the sale. We need to occupy the house to protect Tyler's interests." The room went so silent, I could hear the waves lapping against the shore outside. Jennifer's face didn't just pale, it froze. "You see," I continued, looking directly at my mother-in-law, "I realized something today. Jennifer, your power in this family, it was never about your character. It was never about being a warrior or a saint. Your authority was a shell that was rented by my bank account. You thought if they stayed 30 days, they would become tenants at will, forcing me into 85 separate, year-long eviction battles just to reclaim my own hallways. You spent a decade treating me like an outsider, while I was the one paying for the throne you're sitting on." Brooke stepped forward and handed the manila envelope to Tyler, then a second one to Jennifer. "Based on the evidence of your residential fraud and the forgery of my signature, the court has granted me an emergency order for exclusive occupancy." "These are divorce papers, Tyler," I said. "And for you, Jennifer, that is a formal notice to quit. You and every single person in this room have 72 hours to vacate this property. This is a private residence, not a tactical foothold for property theft. Coordinating 85 people to leave in 3 days will be a logistical nightmare, Tyler, but as of this moment, your lack of planning is no longer my emergency." Jennifer scrambled to stand, her hands shaking as she gripped the papers. "You can't do this! We are family! You're throwing an old woman out on her birthday!" "No, Jennifer," I said, leaning in so only she could hear the ice in my words. "Your forged voter registration is not a shield. It is a confession of a felony that renders your claim to residency null and void. I'm just ending the lease on your entitlement. The funding for your Diamond Jubilee has been permanently revoked. Manage that." I turned and walked out, leaving Brooke to handle the panicked questions. As I stepped onto the porch, I felt the walls of the cage I had built finally fall away. This wasn't a family gathering anymore. It was an eviction of ghosts. It is October now, 7 months since the front door slammed, and I finally found my wings. The Lake Forest Manor is quiet, save for the wind through the trees and the occasional song of a bird. The maple tree in the backyard is fire orange again, a vibrant, living testament to the change of seasons and the beauty of shedding what is no longer needed. The heritage suite is no longer a bunk room for strangers, it is my studio again. My reading chair is back by the window, and my architectural sketches are spread across a desk that is no longer buried in the basement. Tyler moved back to Ohio. Last I heard, he is living in Jennifer's cramped apartment, selling medical devices remotely and making about $55,000 a year. The Diamond Jubilee dream ended not with 85 guests in a lakeside mansion, but with 12 people in a small restaurant in Columbus, paid for by an aunt who finally told Jennifer she needed professional help. I have come to realize that cutting those toxic ties was the most important architectural project of my life. In my profession, we learn that if the foundation is compromised, the only way to save the occupant is to vacate the premises. I wasn't being harsh or vindictive. I was practicing self-preservation architecture. I was reclaiming the space I had let them occupy physically and mentally for free. Many people stay in toxic relationships because of what we call the sunk cost fallacy, the belief that they must keep investing in a failing structure because they have already spent 11 years on it. But love is not enough when it expects you to fund your own erasure. Financial sovereignty is about more than just a bank account. It is the physical manifestation of your right to exist fully and without permission. To those of you who have ever felt like the outsider or a problem to be managed in your own family, this is for you. You are not a variable to be balanced in someone else's equation. You are not a line item in a budget for someone else's happiness. Your wings have been there the whole time, hidden beneath the weight of expectations you were never meant to carry. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stop trying to fix a house that was never designed to be a home. If the blueprints of your life feel like they were drawn by someone who doesn't see your worth, remember that you hold the pen, step off the cliff. The fall is only terrifying for a second, but the flight is everything. If this blueprint for reclaiming your life touched your heart, please share it with someone who feels trapped in their own home. Don't forget that your wings are already there, you just need the courage to jump. Subscribe to join our community of resilient women building better, freer futures. I will see you in the next video.